Hey everybody, me and Joe from Boss USA. Welcome to the next episode of Shop Time Live. In tonight's episode, we're going to have the gang from the Golden Age Air Museum. So stay tuned. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Shop Time Live. On tonight's episode, we've got, as you can see, the pretty much the entire gang from the Golden Age Air Museum. How we doing, guys?
How's it going, sir?
Good. I'm going to let Mike go ahead and introduce everybody.
All right, we're still having a couple of technical difficulties here, Joe, so bear with us.
That's okay.
I'm Mike Damiani, Golden Age Air Museum, Director of Maintenance around here. I try to keep these airplanes legal and flying. And to my right is Mr. Mike O'Neill. I think, no, that's Chuck over there. No. To my left is Mike O'Neill. Mike is one of our directors, and Chuck is one of our main volunteers. Now, Chuck is also a modeler. He's built quite a few radio control airplanes in his lifetime. I'm an RC guy. I've got a Balsa USA Camel. I got a Balsa USA D7. And I bought a Balsa USA Newport 11 from Tim Haggerty and finished it.
Nice. Yes.
So I got quite a few airplanes from the Balsa.
I heard Tim Haggerty's name on there. We need to work on your list of friends. I'm just saying that's a little, we're going to set that goal a little bit higher. I'm only saying that because I know Tim's here. So yeah, those are good friends of mine. Well, and that's what spurred me on to have you guys on here, is because I knew you were all modelers, and now, of course, you're doing the full-scale thing, and we're all about anything aviation related.
I'm going to try some here, Joe, because this thing is really breaking up bad. I'm going to head over
to
the door. These guys will follow me, hopefully, and see if we can get a better thing.
We're having signal issue, guys. That's what happens when you're trying to film from an airplane hangar.
Work off an iPhone here. All right. I don't know. Can you hear a little better? Are we getting a better signal now?
Yeah, I got you. You guys got me okay?
We're still getting a little break up in the signal here, but I just wanted to give you a quick look around the museum grounds here. For those of you that haven't seen it, there's the office. You're looking out towards the main ramp. There's one of our main hangars hiding over there. And it's got my face in the way. There it is. Okay. And then where we're at right now is here. There's Mike and Chuck. That's the shop and the lower hangar. So we have 3 hangars full of airplanes, plus the shop where we're building, restoring them, all that kind of neat stuff. So there's just a little overview. We're bedded down for the winter right now. Hopefully we won't be bedded down in the spring, because it was a little bit of a difficult year because of all the COVID restrictions.
Right, and those of you that don't know, Grimes Field is where they're located, and that's going to be in Bethel, Pennsylvania. So keep an eye out over at the Golden Age Air Museum website, and the Golden Age Air Museum website is going to be www.goldenageair.org. They post all of their links and all of their stuff on there for their events that they have upcoming. They keep the website pretty well updated to what it is that's going on. You can go on there and check out, what they've got going on with their collection. And you can see here the list of airplanes that are in the collection are pretty extensive. You've got everything from the Pete and Poles to the Cavaliers to monocoups, Sopwith Pup. And it's got a list of all the airplanes that are flying. They've also got several antique automobiles on the site. They got the 27 model TT truck, the Henry. They got the Ford Model A Roadster. They got a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to go ahead and encourage you folks to go over there and hit this donate button. So as Mike said, we had a lot of unfortunate incidents this year with the whole COVID thing. And museums like Golden Age Air Museum have had a rough time financially, because of the fact that they weren't able to do their biplane rides like they normally would. They weren't able to get the influx of people coming in for the shows like they would normally do. So anything that you could do to help them out would be completely awesome. Make sure you check out their link for their membership. They have several different memberships available, from $25 all the way up to whatever it is you want to spend. these places depend on us for income to be able to keep all these beautiful airplanes flying. Again, they're located over on 371 Airport Road in Bethel, Pennsylvania. And if you go on www.goldenageair.org, you'll be able to get all the information that you need to be able to check it out. All right. So we're back to the gang here. I think we're still trying to figure out what the best setup is, which is totally fine. I'm going to try to come off of... I'm going to take the iPad away, and I'm going to try the phone. Let's see if this works better.
Yeah.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, it seems to be, because you're not breaking up on me now.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to let Mike kind of take over, talk about all the stuff that they've got going on there and stuff that you might expect to see, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so we'll give this a shot. We're in the shop right now, and again, I have with me over there hiding in the background, we got Mike O'Neill and Chuck Zirkle. Again, Mike is one of our directors, and just a little bit of background of Mike. Mike is an aviation artist. He's a pilot, and he's helping us build the SPAD. He's also on our board of directors. So Mike is, we're going to show you the SPAD right here. I don't know if can everybody see the back of the SPAD there?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, sir.
So this is a SPAD 13 replica. You guys in Balsa USA land, I'm sure a bunch of you have built the Balsa USA third scale. So this is a 1-to-1 scale SPAD 13. See if I can give you a better view of it. I'm going to stand over here by the Cessna 195 and kind of give you a bit overshot of it. Now, we did a little bit different from the standpoint of this airplane. As you know, the original airplane was all wood. Okay, so this airplane is a steel tube structure with wood wherever it needs to be to give it its shape. Now, airfoils, tail feathers, all that stuff is exactly the same as original. The major difference is we're using a modern engine. Now, Mike, why don't you tell them a little bit about the SPAD there?
Oh.
Why don't you grab the phone? This is Mike O'Neill.
Thanks. That is a photo. Oh, okay. Technically deficient. That's me. Okay. So this is like Mike said, this is the SPAD 13, a full-size airplane. The reason we're building this airplane, as most folks will know, is that during World War I, we didn't produce any fighter airplanes of our own. The U.S. didn't produce any fighter airplanes. We're primarily flying French and British products, SE-5s and SPADs primarily, some Sopwith Camels. But the SPAD was the primary airplane that our guys were flying. This airplane, once it's done, let me get down the side of the airplane here, see if we can get this in the picture. Once we get done with this airplane, it'll be painted in the colors of Charles Biddle. It's coming out. Okay, Mike. Charles Biddle, who was a Pennsylvania native, an ace, and a squadron commander of the 13th Aero Squadron, U.S. Aero Squadron. And that is the squadron insignia for the 13th, that running skeleton, nicknamed Oscar by the guys in the unit. Biddle's airplane is kind of jazzy looking. It was a commanding officer's airplane, so it had, you can see that red, white, and blue flash coming through Oscar's head there. That will actually run from the back of the headrest all the way down to the tail post, which you can see in the back there. And then there'll be a big commanding officer's 0 on the side of the airplane. The squadron insignia that's on there right now, it's actually painted on a piece of fabric. It is modeled after a piece of fabric that actually came off of Biddle's airplane that is in the collection of one of his mechanics, family of one of his mechanics now, out in Washington State. They cut it off of the airplane that we're replicating here right after the war. So that's the basic history on the SPAD. There were probably between 7,000 and 12,000 of these airplanes. The number is kind of nebulous. Built during the war. How about if I get my head on the screen so you can hear me here? This is kind of challenging with the phone. But there are between 7,000 and 12,000 of these airplanes built during the war. Like I said, our guys were using them. Virtually every one of our fighter squadrons in France used this airplane during the First World War. And that's the reason that we're building this magnificent old airplane. Mike can give you more technical details on the airplane about the engine we're using and some of the other stuff, but we've made some modifications to the airplane, which I think you'll find are interesting from the standpoint of usability and safety, but we've tried to keep the airplane as original as possible within those parameters. So Mike, I want to turn this back over to you so we can take like a walk around. Would probably be a good idea. Go around
Sounds
the airplane
good to me.
now. Why don't we
Sounds
do
good.
that?
All right, Joe. So there's a little bit of background on the airplane for you. Is there a way I can flip this camera around so I can,
Should be able to.
I got to figure out how to do it.
It might not let you. You might just have to spin the camera
Yeah,
around
we're gonna
away.
have to do
So
We're going to have to spin it. Okay. So as Mike was saying, the SPAD, there's a couple of details on this airplane. I'm going to try to show you the cockpit here because we tried to make it as original as possible. And you can see right there, we have a oil temperature gauge. We have the tachometer. You can see the fuel selectors there, the center panel. Those two big cutouts are for that famous pair of Vickers. Now, the American airplanes didn't really use Vickers. American airplanes used Marlins. American-built Marlin versions of the Vickers. Now, as you get around to the other side, you can see we have the altimeter, and we have an airspeed indicator, and you can see over there, that's my temperature gauge. So that's my oil temp gauge over there in that white one. Now, the altimeter is interesting. I don't know if you noticed that big, huge white faced with a brown case around it. It's an Italian altimeter. Now, they use French altimeters, but the Italians flew these airplanes as well. So that's actually a SPAD type altimeter. So we're trying to be as accurate as possible as far as the instrumentation. And believe it or not, the instrumentation works quite well with a modern engine. A lot of the same fittings, because a lot of the things we use in a modern airplane engine were developed in World War I. Here's an interesting trivia piece of information for you. How many times have you thought of a spark plug on an airplane engine? It's an 18 millimeter thread. Okay. On an American airplane, everything else is SAE, right? Society of Automotive Engineers, the 7/16s, half inch, 3/4. Why the heck do we use an 18 millimeter spark plug? That's a trivia question. What do you think?
I'm guessing because that's what it was originally.
The French had the best porcelain, so everybody adopted French spark plugs.
Nice. Very
So
cool.
that's a piece of neat little trivia.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you some of the beautiful sheet metal work on this thing. This is this airplane. The sheet metal work is all done by our museum director, Paul Dougherty Jr. There's the cow. That exhaust stack was built by Paul as well. Now, the tip of this exhaust stack is interesting, just like original. Look at how that thing's cut.
That is amazing.
I fabricated and welded that thing up. Jerry Wild did most of the work on that tip there, and Paul did all the forming and welding. Now, as you know, the airplane originally had a Hispano Suiza V8, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
we have a Continental 0470 out of the Cessna 182 hiding under that cowling. So it's 2,600 RPM, 230 horsepower. The original was 220 V8. So a little bit interesting. Now, the one thing you got to remember, though, is when you say 230 horsepower, horsepower is a function of RPM, is it not?
Yes, sir.
So 230 horsepower, 2,600 versus 220 horsepower at about 1,900. See the difference?
Yes, sir.
So we'll be spinning about an 88-inch propeller on this to keep the prop tips from going supersonic. The original was over 100.
Wow,
So
that's cool.
The chief cook and bottle washer, the owner of the organization and president, just walked in. So I'm going to introduce you to Paul Dougherty here. Where are you at there, Paul?
I'm right here.
Okay,
Right behind your finger. There he is.
This is Paul. He owns the operation. He's the one who started this whole mess out here about how many 20-some years ago?
1996.
Yep.
Well,
That's-
it started in 1985, but it came to this establishment in 1996.
You see that airplane back there in the background? That's Cessna 195.
Yes, sir.
That's the airplane that started the whole mess back in 1985.
Very
First
cool.
airplane Paul ever restored. So I'm going to hand you to Paul here for a minute.
Oh,
Let
you
him.
don't have to hand it to me. You're doing such a good job. I just ran through. I'm still dirty. Keep talking, Mike. Hi, guys. If you have any questions, I'm here.
I'll keep going on the SPAD then, and we'll go from there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Being dirty is fine. I got balsa dust all over me, so it's all good.
That's dust from cleaning a house. So there you can see again the 0470. So 2,600 RPM, 88-inch propeller at 230 rated horsepower. Now we made some changes to the airplane, and one of the things that we've done is we bought the engine. Sorry, I keep grabbing the phone the wrong way. We bought the engine from a salvage company, and came with all the electrical stuff. Yeah, I know it's a sacrilege. We're putting electrical stuff in the SPAD. But here's the thing: there's a standing order. If you're flying the airplane here at the Air Museum, you're not allowed to use the electrical. You got to start it and run it just like original, because if you get caught using electrical, you're banished from flying any more airplanes.
Right.
We put the electric in the airplane mainly because we wanted to be able to take it on the road. And the Sopwith Pup is also a modern engine. Our Sopwith Pup, which is a picture on the front of the webpage there, that has a Lycoming 0320 hiding in the front. That's it there. And that's me flying it there. So I get to fly that little beast. At any rate,
cool.
The SPAD has electrical system. So we take the two airplanes. The idea is that whoever's flying the SPAD hand props the pup and then jumps into SPAD and fires up, and we go.
Okay. So I have a question, and feel free, those of you that are in the chat, we've got quite a few actual live viewers. So what is the correlation between what is legal for you guys to run versus what the FAA requires you guys to run? Is there much difference between the two? I mean, is it pretty standard, or is it really, it makes it a lot harder for you guys to do what you do because of the safety regulations that you have to have in place to work with the FAA?
I'm going to hand you off to Paul for this one.
As long as the paperwork's in order, they don't care what you do.
Okay.
It comes down to whether you want to run an engine from World War I or an engine from the 1960s. As long as the paperwork's in order and their liability's out of it, they don't care.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
That's
All right.
my 2 cents on that. They really, I mean, we do have to deal with certain things like ELTs, emergency locator transmitters, minimum equipment in the airplane, some instruments, things like that. But that's all minor.
Very cool. I was always curious about how that worked for you guys.
Yeah. I know this. There's been talk of that in different groups about the FAA not allowing this to be flown or that to be flown. They don't care as long as the paperwork's in order. They don't care what you fly.
Yeah, even in the RC world, I found that the actual requirements by the FAA aren't as nearly as intrusive as what people think they are. And it kind of gets blown a little bit out of proportion, right, as far as, oh, the sky is falling. But a lot of times it's not quite as complicated as you might think. So that's good.
Right. The actual FAA will probably never see this airplane until the first time it flies in an air show. So,
yep.
Yeah, it'll be a designated airworthiness representative that'll come out and give us an airworthiness certificate. That'll be it.
Perfect. Now, not to put you guys on the spot because I know you're hard at work, but what is the estimated date of arrival for the SPAD on the air show circuit?
About 5 years ago.
Perfect. So that way we're right on schedule.
It was a 2-year project that I believe we're on year number 6.
Number 8.
Number 8. Number 8. Time flies. I'm getting older.
So we're right on schedule. Perfect.
We are putting a lot of things have happened in the meantime since we started this project. We have put a lot of other airplanes in the air in the process, but this is huge. It's probably the biggest project that'll come out of the shop, and we're doing a real full court press on it right now. I sent text messages. We have a text group from everybody that works on it, and I sent some ultimatums out about a week and a half ago, that this is it. This wing is going to be done by the end of the year. And then January, we're going to do our first fits. We're going to get this thing assembled looking like an airplane and get all the systems working, all the control cables, get all that in. I don't know if Mike told you about our misfortune with the paint. So we're going to have to break it completely down again to get it all repainted and refinished. And then put it back together and then start the covering. I would like to be covering by this winter or this summer. We don't have much in the way of fabrication. I have a little bit of sheet metal to finish up on the front. Probably the largest fabrication project we have right now is the shutter system that sits in front of the engine that would open and close on the water cooled. For us, we have to pin it open because we do not want it to close on an air cooled engine.
Definitely.
The last major component, the wing. I don't know if you've been over to the wing.
Not yet. We're headed there.
The wing is, I want to say it's days from being done, just a couple days from being done. Just needs to be cleaned up after that. And then we have ailerons to finish, which with this crew shouldn't take us too long. I mean, the fuselage, the tail components, instruments. I mean, this thing's actually, it's electrically ready to go right now. You put a battery in it, it'll start up. I mean, everything's there.
We need a propeller first.
We need a propeller. That could be the holdup, is how long it takes to get a propeller. But fabrication is really nearing an end. So the shutters, the wing struts, we have the components. We just need to develop the lengths, which we'll do. We'll get the upper wing hanging in position. We'll build a cradle to hang the wing. And we'll get the lower wings, upper wings in position. We'll get everything more or less rigged to make sure we have the correct sizes for the wing struts, cabane struts. Everything's on the prints, but we are finding problems with the prints. Plus how we've redesigned the airplane. We want to make sure we didn't make any major changes that we don't know about.
It's kind of like
Very
building a big
cool.
model airplane.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah,
some
it sounds a lot like it.
All right. So one other thing I want to point out before we go over to the wing here, if you're looking at the fuselage here, something that's interesting about SPADs. See that metal box there? Everybody see
Yes.
that metal box in there? Anybody want to guess
Yes,
what
sir.
that metal box, gentlemen, is a bomb bay. There's 2 bombs that can stand in that metal box and drop out vertically. And so, of course, we put them in there and we made it functional. So you can, let's see, I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, just show the bottom up. It's cool. So we look underneath.
Yeah, so you can look up underneath the airplane there. There you can see. the
Okay.
bombs. And up in the top are 2 little hooks on bowding cables. And then I'm going to try to show you this. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you should be able to see that. See that cable moving there?
Yes, sir.
That is the bomb drop. There's 2 spring-loaded cables. When you pull a lever in the cockpit, it releases a ring on the nose of the bomb, and it drops out.
And the
Excellent.
bombs actually hang in weird. The hang in nose first, so the tail sticks out. You
Kind of-
think you would put it the other way, but no, the tail of the bomb sticks out the bottom.
That's like a Heinkel 111. That's how the Germans drop their bombs out of there.
Okay.
So that's an interesting little feature of the SPAD that we made functional. Now,
That's very cool.
What's that, Joe? Sorry.
I said that's very cool.
Since we have a modern engine, we didn't need the original oil tank. So what we did was we built one. Instead of using it for oil, this little blue tank over here next to the seat. Well, let's see if I can get a good view of that for you. Ah, there it is.
There it is. Yep, got it.
That's a smoke oil tank. So we can put smoke on it, and when we get shot down by the triplane, we can put smoke on.
Very cool.
So that's the top with pup. I always get shot down because I'm the only one with the smoke system. There's the control stick. You can see it. I don't know if you can see it vertically there. It's hard to see on this phone.
Yeah, it's actually working really well. Yeah, very nice.
So that's all ready to pretty much ready to rock and roll, finished. Now, unfortunately, like Paul intimated, on the fuselage, we painted it with epoxy primer, but it wasn't prepped quite the way we normally do. We decided to use soda blasting instead of sandblasting. In the past, we've always used sandblasting. Well, the problem was the sandblasting process etches the metal. The soda blasting process does not. So unfortunately, I don't know if, yeah, I can see right here, if you can see spots. I don't know if you'll see it.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
The paint is rusting off there where my finger was. Okay.
Right.
So we have to strip the fuselage all the way back down and turn it back in and just basically redo the whole thing.
Wow.
Did you talk about with the what we did to try to keep everything looking kind of authentic with the air-cooled engine in place of the water-cooled engine now? There would have originally been on the top, this would have been the expansion of the fill for the water in the radiator. And we thought we got to get something up there and make it useful. So this is actually the oil fill for the Continental. So, looks just like the water fill, but hopefully not be able to put water in it. but we tried to do all those things. If there was something that protrudes out of the airplane in the wing, there's what would have been a water vent. We're going to use as a fuel vent. There's some things like that everything will look kind of right, but they might serve different purposes on our airplane.
That's another example right there. That little thing right there, and I'm trying to get the phone on. Can't get the camera on it. There it is.
A little bit. This one here. Yeah.
There it is.
That's the original part.
We're using this as a fill for the smoke tank. That's actually the breather. That would have been the breather for the oil tank.
That's cool.
That's been a breather and the fill for the engine.
Now that wing behind me there is an interesting one. That doesn't have anything to do with the SPAD. That's from an original Monocoop 90A, a Lambert-powered Monocoop 90A. So we have a project up in the hangar up above. Since we have the Holy Grail Monocoop, we're probably not going to do that one, but it's going to be maybe a project sometime in the future. Now, before I take you over to Wing, I want to introduce you to Chuck here and have Chuck talk a little bit about the museum and his area in it and his model airplane stuff.
Hi, Chuck, sir.
Hey, Chuck.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, so what I really find great here is they get you hands-on as quick as they think you can find something to do. So you get involved in some of the woodwork, you get involved in sweeping the floor if that's what's necessary, but it's really, there's lots and lots of avenues. My main objective here, anything construction-wise they need in here, they kind of rely on me because that's my trade work. So I get to kind of help out, keep the buildings in order. Like this shop we're standing in right here has a metal roof fastened that needed to be kind of resealed, all the little grommets. So the 2,240 screws that hold the roof sheet metal on. Was about 3 days and lots of battery packs later, we're done with that. But that's the kind of stuff. But like today, we were working on, we'll show you this wing later. They get me involved in this stuff, and you never realize models are fun to build, and these are fun to build. But there's a lot more in it. It's ridiculous how many parts are in it.
Right. And it's funny that the guy that put the roof on knows exactly how many screws he used to put the roof on. I find that telling. And that's what I was going to say earlier while we were guys showing the stuff on the airplane. We do the same stuff. All the stuff that you guys are doing to the full scales, we're doing at the RC world. You start talking about, I'm heavily involved in the NASA scale events. And that's one of the things we're constantly working on, is to try to find that little piece. It had this on it. I'm looking right directly at the 3 view and it had this on it. And well, what was that? Well, let's make that piece so that we can put it on the model to get higher scores for competition. So it's the same thing you guys are doing. It's really close.
Is, Joe. That's National Association of Scale Aero Modelers.
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. And it's a ball, and that's what we do. And it's very, very similar. People don't realize how close the models that we're building are to the full scales. I mean, there's really a lot of similarities when you start looking at how they're put together, what pieces they're using, how it's all going together. It's very, very similar.
That's what's in. When we have our model meet in the summertime here and stuff, you see, and a lot of your products show up there, the level of detail, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm a builder who likes to build the scale outline. I don't necessarily get into the details as much, but my God, some guys show up in here and they have everything. They're down to the laces on the boots, the seat belt, the fabric.
Oh yeah.
The combing is correct. It's really, it's astounding. Sometimes I just have to look at these things and just shake my head on it. Wow.
Well, as envious as you are of all the guys that show up with their really super detailed model, I guarantee everyone will tell you that they're envious of the work that you guys are doing there. Guarantee it.
We do have fun. That's for sure.
So,
thank you.
Speaking of model airplane stuff, I want you to look at his landing gear here. I don't know if we can. Let me see if I can get a good video of that landing gear for you. Nope, my phone's not doing what I want it to. Of course not.
There it goes.
Yeah, there you go. That landing gear, you know what that is? That's 1 3/8 birch ply.
Wow.
So
that is cool.
Of course, it has steel axles and steel mounting system. And you can see, let me get my hand out of the picture here. You can see down there the bungee system. We have ropes on holding it together now. The wheels right now are from our Curtis Jenny. They're 26x4s. So they're our shop wheels. We have a pair of heavy duty wheels. They're going to go on in place of those when this airplane actually flies. But it's just details like that. Uh-oh, what happened? I lost my phone here. Hold on a sec. My phone is just loving me today.
There it is.
Okay. So let's come on over to the wing here. And this is the top wing. We have the bottom wings on the wall over there. Can we see those bottom wings hanging there?
Yep, very cool.
Okay. And there's the top wing. We're in the process of building right now. So this has been a culmination of about 5 years worth of work off and on. Now, one thing interesting about a SPAD, and Paul keeps saying, who talked me into building this crazy airplane?
Yeah, whose idea was this?
And the guy standing over there with the World War I aviation artist, Mike O'Neill.
Oh, it was your idea.
No, it's not my idea.
It was my idea. No, it's Mike's idea. All right, Mike, I can blame you.
This airplane, you ready for this, Joe?
Sure.
86 ribs in the wings.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know how many ribs are in a total triplane? The full-size triplane we built?
It's like half of that, right?
56.
Yeah.
Yeah.
30,
Yeah, this is
30 more ribs in this airplane than the entirety of the triplane.
so as a comparison, when you're talking about that, don't feel alone, because on our airplane, our SPAD has more dies than any other airplane that we have.
I believe that.
Yep.
So
I mean, it's to get the scale outline and get the scale. I'm going to run down the leading edge of the wing here. You can see we got that nice leading edge sheeting there. And hey, look at that. Look at that nice joint. Notice it's all glued with epoxy. We use West Systems epoxy. But we have to do a scarf joint where the sheets meet. So I'm going to come down here to one that is fitted. But you see how the joint is sanded on the end there?
yes.
That's going to scarf the second sheet into it. That's 16th inch birch plywood all the way down that leading edge.
That's cool, because that's actually, I just did a video on scarf joining 2 days ago, or like maybe a week ago.
Okay.
So it's basically the same process.
Now, the other thing here is I want you to, I don't know if you can see it, but on the spar there, hold on, let me get the phone in a better position here. Can you see, let me get yeah, right there. You see that line?
Yeah, there you go.
That's
Yes.
the actual scarf of the main spar. Okay. For an aircraft, for a full-size airplane, the scarf has to be 15:1. So it has to be 15 inches by 1 inch to get
Okay.
an accurate scarf. That's how much glue area you have to have. And then you double it by adding plywood behind it.
Excellent. Yeah, that's
to the end
cool.
of the scarf. So this is 2 pieces of wood scarfed together with these huge plywood doubler plates. That's a little easier. You can hold that so they can see it.
Oh, you don't turn the camera around. There we go. Here, you can
It
see
won't
that.
let me.
You can see the splice joint right down there. If I get my finger on it correctly.
Yes. Yep.
That's it. That's where the two are joined together. We do that with a router. We build a special jig on a router and actually route them so we have 2 exact components.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because those of you that follow the channel, we just did a video the other day. I did a scarf joint on the quarter scale cub that I'm building, and it's basically the same thing, except for in my case, I did a 4-inch scarf instead of a 15.
Okay. So yeah, you'll see here, notice there's the ribs, okay? And look at these false ribs.
Yeah.
All those literally hundreds of ribs. Now, we Paul Dougherty Sr. spent hours building these ribs. Now, we lost Paul last November, unfortunately, and we miss him, believe me. But Paul Sr. spent hours and hours and hours of building these ribs. So this is the last project that we'll be able to finish that Paul Sr. actually had his hands into. So this is kind of a tearjerker project for us now. You know, it's kind of like we got
Sure.
to honor Paul Sr. But at any rate, you'll notice we have the false ribs. We have the standard ribs that give it the shape. But look here. See this rib here? That's what we call a compression rib. We can't, with our model airplanes, we rely mostly on the glue joints, the wood, the balsa wood, the spruce all glued together to give it the wing its rigidity. And then we rely on the fabric. Well, we can't do that on a full-size airplane. So we have to actually use a thick, heavy rib with cables to tie them together. Let me see if I can get a good good picture of the turnbuckle here. It's kind of, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
So you have a turnbuckle and another turnbuckle. Let's see, and get back there. There you can see it. All right. And then a crisscross of wires between those turnbuckles. Everybody see those wires there?
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's what gives the wings its rigidity and also allows us to what we call rack the wing. Because when you build a ring like this, it's almost impossible to build it absolutely perfectly square and straight. So we use these turnbuckles and wires not only to give it strength, but also to pull the spar straight.
Very cool.
That's how we true up the whole entire structure. So we're not just relying on the glue joints in the wood. Now, on something like a Taylorcraft or a J3, instead of a compression rib, we have a steel tube member mounted to the rear and front spar that acts as that compression member. Now, this is earlier. Now, if you build a Pitts, an S2, an S1, an S2B, S2C, Pitts 12, they still use compression ribs, but they don't use wire and cable. They use rods. So the structure here is very similar to modern aerobatic biplanes, believe it or not.
Very cool.
So that's the top wing. And again, hopefully we'll have this thing on the airplane mocked together here come this spring, which will be cool. We'll have a bunch of pictures posted up for you. And there's the gang standing down there at the end under the wing of the 195.
Nice.
But also, like, again, on the wall, you can see all those features there. Now, if you look, I don't know if you can see that little box right there I'm pointing at?
Yes.
That's the aileron bell crank mount.
Okay.
What's that? So here we go. You can use the level as a pointer. Right there. Everybody, you see that right there?
Yes, sir.
The bell crank, the aileron bell crank will mount to this block here, stand above, and you'll have that triangular bell crank there. There's a push rod that goes from the fuselage out to the bell crank, and then a rod that comes from the bell crank to the aileron in the top wing.
So this is the bottom one, right? That
Yep.
rod will be like this to the top line.
And there's
Very
ailerons
cool.
only on the top wing.
That actually comes out there, it goes to the bell crank on the outside of the airplane.
Yeah.
Remember, the bell crank sits.
You hear what Paul just said there, Joe?
Kinda, yeah.
They put the bell crank on the outside of the wing. So it's a lot different than a modern airplane. Most modern airplanes, it's all contained in the wing. Whereas like on a Pup or a Camel and triplane, all the cables control and actuate everything basically almost internally. Well, this thing is different. So now I'm going to show you here on the top wing where this is where the aileron bell cranks are going to run in the system.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the aileron bell crank will sit on the aileron here.
Comes up from the bottom.
And comes up from the bottom. And now that actuating rod will come up through here and actuate the aileron through there.
Very cool.
So yeah, so that the aileron bell crank out there, or control arm, I'd call it, actually goes back into the wing. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's, where then the bell crank sits on the outside over there. It's French.
We joke around and say, we joke around that Louis Bechereau, the guy who designed this airplane, had a brother named Pierre. And Pierre had a furniture factory in France. And Pierre needed a whole bunch of work. So Louis made sure the airplane gave him plenty of work during the war.
There you go. Gave him stuff to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, so Paul's going to leave us now. He's got to go back.
Carry on.
Thanks for coming in, Paul. Appreciate it.
I'll give you just a little overview of the Cessna 195 quick while we're here. We've been doing some winter maintenance on this one. It's had some issues, and it's been a while since we really dug in and cleaned things up. So this year we've taken some time to just really detail it and clean it and just got to give it a good inspection. So I'm going to show you there. There's the good old Shaky Jake, Jacobs R755B2, and hiding back there is the exhaust system.
The lights are on, there's no hiring guys go out there.
Yeah, I'm planning to go up there for a couple minutes just to show them around. So there's the Jake. The 195, again, was the first airplane that Paul ever restored as a 19-year-old airline pilot. How's that for your first ever restoration project?
That's pretty cool.
That airplane is in the same paint scheme he put on in 1986.
Wow.
And it's still in pretty good shape. So this airplane went to Oshkosh a number of times, won a bunch of awards. It's a pretty bird. I'll give you a glimpse of the interior of this beast. And we're going to take a couple minutes and run up to the hangar. I'm going to show you around in the hangar just a little bit before we call it a day. But there's the instrument panel. You see we modified this recently. We put in a Air Gizmos air dock so you can bounce your iPad up there and you use your iPad for navigation.
Okay.
So on the standard, what we call the 6-pack. Now the interior on this one, when they first finished the airplane, this was AirTex is a company that does aircraft interiors. And this was their demonstrator for the AirTex interior. Paul did such a nice job on it. It was the first one they ever did. So it ended up becoming a demonstrator. And you can see we have towels on the seats and stuff like that to protect it. So and there's the control yokes. How's that needle Y yoke there? Isn't that wild?
That's cool.
So that's a Cessna 195. I'll tell you what, this is a fast airplane. It does 160 knots. Or 160 miles per hour. I take it back. Sorry, not knots. So it does quite well. All right, let's take a walk outside. I'm going to run up to the hangar. And we're going to take a look at some of the other airplanes in the collection here, and then we'll let you sign off.
Absolutely. So while you're walking, one of the things that came through while we were talking about the SPAD is where did you guys find the Aileron for the replica DR1?
That was the interesting story. Paul found that at Hershey, the automotive flea market every year in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And he negotiated with the guy. He wanted way too much money. He negotiated, ended up getting it for about $12,000.
Wow.
Then we had to go through it. Now we have a second Aileron. Okay. A family donated us a second Aileron that's on almost identical condition to the one in the triplane. So that one's going to go into a Newport 11 or 17. All right. So we're up in the hangar here. There's the Great Lakes behind me. There's the Jenny, and there you can see the triplane. A lot of good stuff in here.
Yes, sir.
Some memorabilia down here, the showcases. This is all memorabilia that came from the family that donated that second 80-horse Aileron to us. So that engine's in fantastic shape, so it's going to go into another airplane.
Very cool.
We have 2 Aileron-powered airplanes flying here at Grimes. And here's some other things that were donated from some friends. Now, one of the things that Mike does before we get to the airplanes is Mike is a World War I aviation historian. He's here with me right now. And right here are some of the uniforms that Mike collects. These are original uniforms from World War I. Now, Mike, you want to give me a little background on these?
Yeah, these are enlisted uniforms. Most of the stuff that I bring out during our World War I event in the summer are officers' uniforms, so observers and pilots, American, French, and British uniforms. But these particular 2 uniforms are enlisted guys, mechanics on the left, and the one on the right is actually from a balloon unit. You can see there's a balloon patch on the wing here, or on the shoulder here.
On the wing.
On the wing. On the shoulder of this uniform, and the 1st Army A on the side here. This is a ground guy from a balloon unit. It's got 2 service stripes. If you can see down on the sleeve here, 6 months each. Those bullion stripes down there. So he was overseas for a year. The red discharge stripe up here, and then of course the balloon unit patch on the sleeve there. Unfortunately, it's not named, so I don't know the soldier that it belonged to. But original uniform and fairly rare because it's from a balloon unit. There weren't a whole lot of those running around.
That's very cool.
Yeah, in the summer we have a pretty large World War I display. All the cabinets that Mike is going to show you here with other stuff in it right now. Every one of them has a different World War I aviation uniform in them, plus a bunch of other ephemera that I have at home, instruments and pieces of airplanes and logbooks and photographs, obviously, that sort of stuff. That only gets shown once a year during our World War I event. So yeah, that's, as Mike said, that's kind of my interest. It's a reason that I'm here at the museum because of the World War I collection here, and that's my particular area of expertise.
Now, Mike
Very cool.
is the president and chief editor-in-chief of the World War Over the Front.
Oh, so I used to be president of the League of World War I Aviation Historians, and then they shanghaied me into being the managing editor of the journal called Over the Front. It's a quarterly publication published by the League of World War I Aviation Historians. And I've been a member in that organization since I was 16 years old, which is
Last week.
a long time ago at this point. And that magazine's been coming out since 1960. It came out 2 different incarnations, 1960 and 1985, and then had a changeover in 1985. But it's been in publication essentially since 1960. Great World War I stuff. And again, like I said, since that's my area of expertise, one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here at the museum is because we've got a couple of awesome World War I airplanes here. We've got the reproduction triplane and the original Curtiss Jenny and the Sopwith Pup. We've got the part scale Rumpler, and of course now we're going to have the SPAD as soon as we get that thing done. So.
We figured we needed another Allied airplane because we had 2 German airplanes.
Yeah.
But now
Right.
we're gonna have 2
Got to
fighters.
even the odds.
What's that?
Got to even the odds a little.
Well, now we're going to have 3 Allied airplanes because we're going to build a Newport to come with the Aileron. So, we're going to have to build a Fokker D7 or something in full scale, which we have ribs and fuselage size for a full-size Fokker D7 and a
Excellent.
Ranger. So that's going to be hopefully on the project board here in the next 10 years or so.
Another project that we all hope will live long enough to get to.
So I'm going to forego the rest of the showcases. I'm going to show you guys the cool stuff, what you really came here to see. We're going to take a walk over to the triplane here since we're right by it. And there's that good old 80 horsepower Aileron. And you're all familiar with that, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a genuine American-built 80 horsepower Aileron rotary. It was built in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, by the Union Switch and Signal Company. They built these for the Thomas Morse factory in Ithaca, New York. So these two engines were actually built for Thomas Morse Scouts. There we go.
Very
a little
cool.
more light for you.
Oh, that's good.
So one thing interesting, everybody says this is 80 horsepower, correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, remember we said earlier, horsepower is a function of RPM?
Yes.
This engine turns 1,150 RPM. It's
Wow.
667 cubic inches. Let that sink in. Almost 700 cubic inches on an 80 horsepower engine.
Wow.
Now, the propeller, gentlemen, is 98 inches long. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In a model airplane, I've got my quarter scale Camel. I've got a Zenoa G26 on it, okay? And I have a Zor Scimitar 20 by 6. A little big for the airplane, right? But it works great. This engine at 1,150 RPM turns this 98-inch propeller with 85 inches of pitch. Think about that. 85 inches of pitch. Whereas a modern airplane, a Piper Cub, for example, with an 85 Continental, it's a 72-inch propeller with 44 inches of pitch or 46 inches of pitch. Put that in comparison. That's a lot more thrust than a J3, isn't it?
Oh, just a little, yeah.
So this airplane goes up like an elevator, even with the 80 on it. And the 80s are known to run really, really well. They're really nice running engine. Now I'm going to take you around to the back of the airplane here and just give you a glimpse into the cockpit. We tried to make this as accurate as possible. So what we did is Paul's a stickler for accuracy, and there's our replica Spandaus up there. You can see them.
Very nice.
All right, so they actually are gas guns. They will fire oxygen, propane, and make noise. So you can see in the cockpit now. Let me get there you go. There's the ammunition box, and there's the control stick. All right, there's your blip switch in the middle of the control stick. Everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
And the two black levers below the blip switch are the machine gun levers. So you
Excellent.
can fire one at a time, or in the front of it, which is covered by the helmet there, there's a lever you could pull to fire both machine guns at the same time. Now,
Very cool.
what instrument panel? True to Fokker triplane, there is no instrument panel. So I don't know if you can see it, but hiding way down there by the pilot's left knee is a tachometer. And right there is the throttle quadrant. Now, what we did with this is the triplane is supposed to have a throttle quadrant on the stick itself, okay, with the Bowden cable, and then a mixture control on the left throttle, left wall. Unfortunately, it's a little hard to work that way. So what Paul did, we took a Fokker D7 from a guy named Vet Thomas, a Fokker D7 throttle setup, which Vet makes, and it's exactly accurate. And the small one is the mixture. That's your Tampier valve. The large one is the air on the throttle. This actually has a throttle. Now, running back to say there's no throttle on them. Well, the Ailerons are throttled. Okay. So you'll listen to Paul. If you watch some videos of this flying, you'll hear the power come up as he starts to take off roll. And that's exactly what he's doing. This will throttle down to about 650 RPM, which is about half throttle. So a little bit of interesting trivia for those of you who are familiar with these engines.
Very cool.
Now, hiding on this side, I don't know if you can see it. Now, it's difficult to see. Let me see if I can get a flashlight in here and get you some light on this subject. That's the altimeter. Hung on the side of the cockpit by 3 bungees. As per original. Okay. And then, of course, over on the other side, you have your ignition switch. We modified a 2-position Bosch switch into a single position for the single ignition on this Aileron rotary. So it's a fairly accurate replica. It's a fairly accurate representation of the original airplane. So I haven't flown it. It's not my airplane, so I don't get to fly it. I get to fly the Sopwith Pup. A little easier
Right.
to fly in this thing.
Now,
So-
was that DR1? Was that built from an aerodrome kit?
No. The aerodrome kits are nowhere near accurate. They're nice, neat little airplanes, but they're not accurate at all. This is a Ron Sands plans modified with Akeem Angles information and Gary Sewell's information.
Very cool.
So Ron Sands built a fairly accurate airplane, or drew up a fairly accurate set of plans. But you can see one of the big issues with Ron Sands plans is here at the wing root is he has a huge block of wood built up in here. Well, it's just, you see how this is just coming to the taper. This is what that looks like. It's just a couple of short ribs, and then you laminate this curve into here. Okay. So you laminate that curve in there. It's really neat how it's set up. That information, again, came from Akeem Angles. Now, you might have seen him on Facebook. He's the guy who's doing all that really, really neat original Fokker stuff. He's building one of every original Fokker. So he's back into the projects. He had given up on it for a while, but he's back at it now. So some pretty cool stuff going on there.
Yes, absolutely. Very cool.
Hey, Mike, I got anything to add to that? We can talk about Lotar and all that good stuff.
Yeah, let me get on this side so you can.
I'm going to hand you the phone so you can.
So I can drive. So I can get my thumb in the way.
Yeah, like me. You're on the
Like that.
You're on the
Perfect.
volume there, so.
Okay, I will try not to pump up the volumes much. So the airplane is Fokker triplane, as Mike said, and most Fokker triplanes you've ever seen painted are painted in the colors of the Red Baron 80 Victory Ace. All red airplanes. There are entirely too many red airplanes on the planet. So we decided Paul decided to paint this airplane in the colors of Manfred von Richthofen and the Red Baron's brother, Lothar, who was a 40 Victory Ace, a very successful fighter pilot in his own right. So you'll see for the markings, nerds like me, you'll see the struts, the cowling, the wheel covers, which you can't see from here. The wheel covers are all red. Those are squadron colors for Yasta 11. The back of the airplane here, get myself out of the way. The back of the airplane is yellow. That was Lothar's personal color. He was in a dragoon unit before he came to aviation, and that his piping on his uniform was yellow, so he used that. And on the top wing, which you can't see here, the top wing is also yellow except for the cross fields, which are an olive drab with obviously the black and white crosses on them. But that marking scheme is interesting because as you know, with the German aircraft, those guys had a little more latitude than the Brits and the Americans to personalize things. And in this unit, the squadron markings of the red nose and the struts and the wheel covers were standard. And then each individual pilot was allowed to have his own personal color somewhere else on the airplane. So you have Lothar with yellow. Manfred had not an all red airplane at this time. You had this streaked airplane with a red tail. A guy named Hans Weiss used a white tail. There were a blue tail in that squadron as well. So it was very easy to identify these guys from the air by the individual markings on the airplanes. And it was also useful because the Germans required for confirmed victories a ground observer. And it was very easy to identify airplanes that had these kind of broad stroke markings on them, where you had a big yellow tail and a big white tail, as opposed to an all green airplane or an all blue airplane or something similar to that. So in this unit, and most German units, these markings were significant for that reason. One thing Mike didn't talk about that I'm going to show you is on the triplane. Most of you guys who's ever seen a triplane know about the wingtip skids. Let's see if we can get down here and see them. How does this work, Mike? This is like
Camera's right there.
The camera's right there. Okay, so you can see in the corner here. It's very tough to see the way I'm working this. Mike's pointing to it here. That's the wingtip skid on the airplane, and it's just essentially an axe handle. And the two prototypes, the two Fokker F1 prototypes, did not have them. And of course, when they went into field and got into these unimproved airfields, landing and taking off, they found that they needed some protection for the wing down there. What we found is it doesn't matter if they're on the wings because Paul was flying this airplane out of Dayton, and came very close to ground loop in the airplane, and the first thing that contacted the ground was not the axe handle, it was the wingtip. So it might prevent some damage, but probably not. But it is an accurate representation of the original. So from that point of view, it's an interesting feature of the airplane. I don't think I have much else to add. As Mike pointed out, the airplane is done as original as we could possibly get it. You know, there were only 320 of these airplanes built during war. None of them survived World War II. The last one was destroyed in Berlin during an Allied bombing raid in World War II. So we've done as accurate a job as we can. And a couple of things that we found out about it, though, is from pilot reports, modern pilot reports of this airplane, talk about what a killer it is, how hard it is to fly, how hard it is to handle on the ground, all of these things. They're airplanes with a little different geometry than the original. The landing gear on most of those replicas are shorter. They tend to use tail wheels instead of tail skids. They tend to have bigger, heavier engines in them. They're using Warners and have engines that are heavier than the Aileron. And what we found is, they're hard to see out of because the landing gear is shorter, and what that does is
The tail skid is longer.
the tail skid is longer, and that kind of obviates that cutout in the wing right there. If you imagine that the airplane, the nose sits lower on the ground, that kind of lowers it in your field of vision. And when that happens, it's harder to see out of the front of the airplane. So all of those things that they thought they were doing to make the airplane safer, modern engines, shorter landing gear, different tail arrangement, all that stuff actually made the airplane harder to handle on the ground. And we found that the tail skid, the higher landing gear, obviously the original Roaring engine, the airplane is not quite the killer that everybody talks about. And the other thing of course, to remember is that in 1917 and 1918, when people are talking about how hard this airplane was to fly or how difficult it was, challenging it was, you're talking about kids, 20-year-old kids who had 40 hours of flying time.
Total.
Yeah, total. And now we're being stuck in a triplane, a high-performance airplane like this. Paul, who flies this airplane here, has thousands and thousands,
25,000 hours.
25,000 hours of flying time, which is a little bit different than 40 hours.
Right.
And so the airplane doesn't surprise him as much. He still says it's a little bit of a challenge to fly, particularly ground handling, but in the air, he says it's a very sweet flying airplane. So
yeah, it's funny. It's funny to hear you say that, Mike, because that's exactly the same conversations we have constantly with modelers, because that's one of the biggest questions is with the triplanes, especially is how does it handle on the ground? Well, it handles like a triplane. you got to understand that it handles like a triplane. As long as you understand that, and as long as you don't forget that there is a rudder, left stick, then it flies like a big baby. Once you get it up in the air, they fly phenomenally. And that's fun. I'm just sitting back here laughing because those are the same exact stories we hear from people that are wanting to get into triplanes. They ask that same question because they've heard all that and they think it's going to be tough to fly. That's funny.
Yep. They're not hard. They're just different.
yeah,
and the other thing you said that made me laugh is myself and my boss are always talking about, we'll be at events and we'll kind of be in the reminiscing mode, and we'll sit there and we go, think about this. When they had these airplanes, they took a kid off a horse going 40 miles an hour and put him in an airplane going 100 miles an hour. Can you imagine the rush that they experienced going from a horse to an airplane? It's crazy.
It's keeping on that thread for just a second. I knew a pilot, World War I pilot, when I was a kid named Philip Kassam. And one of the things he talked about was going from his barracks on a truck ride to the ship he was going to get on in to go to Europe. And he said they were screaming down the street at 35 miles an hour. He said the most thrilling ride you've ever had. 35 miles an hour.
That's funny.
35 miles an hour on my bicycle, for crying out loud.
Right?
But it was
That's
just, again, it was one of those. It was one of those, that's 35 miles an hour in a car in 1918 was screaming down the
That's
street.
smoking. Yeah. That's almost the barrier of sound.
Well, I'm going to turn you back over to Mike here to talk about a couple other airplanes.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
I'm going to add a couple more quick details on the triplane here because it seems to be the airplane everybody's interested in. I don't know if you can see the aileron cables right here. Can you see the aileron cables?
Yes, sir.
You notice there's two of them.
Yes, sir.
This is the ailerons are boxed in such a way that if you lose the cables on one side, the other side still works.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
basically, it's a full circuit on each side of the airplane. So if we got one set of cables shot out, the airplane was still controllable.
Excellent.
So that's something else that's kind of neat that most modelers don't know anything about. And the other thing I wanted to point out is, if you notice, really there's no flying wires on a triplane. You got some in the center, you got some in between a landing gear, right?
Right.
So this is a fully cantilevered wing. All right, that's a fully cantilevered wing. There's a huge box spar in the middle, which is basically two double tapered spars boxed in together. And we have a picture somewhere. I have a picture somewhere, Paul, when the spars were first finished, standing in the middle of the spar, standing on some horses. And
Wow.
it wasn't even flexing. It wasn't even
That's
flexing.
cool.
It's an incredibly strong airplane. And the steel tube structure inside is just like we're building. You know, if you go by a Citabria or a Champ or something like that, it's the same fuselage. It's the same
Very
type of
cool.
fuselage. So it's most airplanes in that era were built on Anthony Foker's design. Walter Beach and Lloyd Stearman with the Travel Airs, they designed that airplane because of Anthony Foker. They designed that steel tube fuselage and they used the elephant ear ailerons because of the aerodynamic counterbalances. So it's an interesting setup.
Very
Okay.
cool.
Let's see. Let's take a look at the Jenny. What do you think? Sound good?
Sure. We'll
All
take a
right.
look at the Jenny and then we'll get you guys back to your work.
All right. We'll skip the pup because that's a modern replica. It actually looks really good, though. This is a original Curtis Jenny. I'm going to go back out to the end here so you can get a better picture of the airplane. Let's flip the camera over here. All right, there we go. So there she is. Original 1918 Curtis Jenny. This airplane took us 9 years to restore. Well, seven and a half, almost 8. Yeah, close enough. We started restoring this airplane in 2001. And believe it or not, this airplane is a freaking lumberyard. Okay.
Oh,
If you
yeah.
think- If you think a SPAD's a lumberyard, this thing's 10 times worse. But hey, notice something. Can you see how many ribs?
Right. It's got a quarter of the ribs that the SPAD has.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11 ribs per wing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have right here is Curtis OX5. That's an original Curtis OX5 there. That's what's in the front of the Jenny. So you get an idea of what that engine looks like. It's hiding on the nose. I'm going to jump over the rope here and give you a little look at the front. The Jenny is believe it or not, it is a real sweetheart of an airplane to fly. There's the nose on it. You can see there's the cylinder assembly up there. See those exposed rockers?
Very cool.
Got to lube those things up every time you fly it. But this, to be honest with you, Paul sent me free in this thing one day. I was scared to death. Okay. Here I'm taking off, and some guys in my buddy's $750,000 airplane that I can't replace if I wreck it. I'll tell you what, Charles Lindbergh said about this airplane. He said, I could teach my 70-year-old grandmother how to fly this airplane in 1 hour. And the honest truth is, he probably could. This is probably one of the easiest, nicest flying airplanes I've ever flown in my life. So that's the Curtis Jenny. And this is, again, this is an original airplane. It's a Curtis airplane, restored. Now, when we say restored with an airplane like this, you basically buy, and this project was basically 5 buckets of fittings, okay?
Right.
And about 10 pieces of wood. So, and basically almost all the wood is in there. About 80% of the metal is original. About 20% of the wood is original. We are flying with some original wooden spars from 1918. So we have 102-year-old wing spars in a couple of the wings. I think it's the top left and the bottom right.
That is very cool.
So it's the wood from that period actually tested better than modern wood. The propeller is by a guy named Mike Redpath, Falcon Propellers. It's red oak. And when you swing this thing to start it, boy, is it a beast. It's heavy. And of course, there's your radiator up front, liquid cooled. There's a water pump in the back. And you can't really see it from this perspective, but back on that engine, there's a whole bunch of water pipes and things. And yes, they do leak.
That's
So
cool.
This time of year, we put some glycol in it and keep it in good shape for the wintertime. I'll just give you a little quick view inside the cockpit so you can get a chance to see what it's like in there. And then we'll let you go. So, okay, so here's the rear cockpit. Let me get some light in there. Again, we're in a dark hangar. Okay, so there's the instrument panel. Looks pretty sparse, doesn't it?
Yeah, very cool.
So you have altimeter, tachometer. Over here on the right, you got the tach. And then we have an oil temperature gauge, or an oil pressure gauge, I mean. And up in the upper left there is the water temperature. I've got your throttle over there, your baseball bat for a stick. And we have some batteries for the night lights, the instrument panel lights. You notice what's missing? Airspeed indicator.
I was getting ready to say airspeed indicator. Is that on the floor?
Nope, there is none.
Wow.
You fly this by the seat of your pants. Remember the term flying by the seat of your pants?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
You can tell how fast you're going by how the wind sounds coming through the flying wires.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But if you see down in the corner there, that little T handle is the retard and advance for the magneto. So to start this thing, you have to retard the magneto slightly so it doesn't kick back. And then once it's running, you push it forward to advance and to get full power.
Nice.
So it's an interesting area. And of course, there's the big old compass in the middle. That's a must. Got to have oil pressure, temperature, and a compass. Those are required. That's still the requirements this day and age, believe it or not. And down there, that little, you can see the original Curtis data tag there.
That's
Curtis
cool.
Airplane Company. So
Very
that's
cool.
just a small smattering of the collection, guys. I'm just glad we had a chance to talk with you and show you the museum.
Yeah, Mike, I really want to thank you and all the guys for coming on. It was awesome. I want to remind everybody that you're going to need to take a check over to goldenageair.org. Check out what they've got going on. They've got a lot of really cool stuff going on. Make sure you go down and click that donation button. Go over and look at those memberships. Those memberships help them be able to keep this stuff flying. And it's really important now, especially with the loss of all of the events from last year, that we support these guys and what they're doing so that they can continue to do what they're doing and we can come out there and see cool stuff. I want to thank the entire crew for showing up and helping us out. I really appreciate all the information. It's obviously a wealth of information, and I'm thinking we're going to have to do this again.
Yeah, I
So,
would say so.
yeah,
There are more.
very,
One thing
very
I
cool.
don't know if you noticed, if you go to our Golden Age Air Museum Facebook page and our group, we have been posting vignettes of the museum. Mike runs those, and we pick an airplane each weekend through the summer and give you a little information on it and video of it. So,
and then we have a couple of shots here by our good friend Tim Haggerty. This is from the pumpkin drop you guys hosted not too long ago. There's lots of stuff going on, so make sure you're over and check out the Golden Age Air Museum Facebook page so you can keep up to date to what's going on with those guys. And like I said, make sure you please don't forget to go on and support what they're doing so that they can continue to do cool stuff. Once again, I want to thank everybody for showing up to see and watch. I really appreciate you guys being there and checking it out. And again, you guys, I really appreciate you coming on. It was really a blast.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure, Joe.
I look
Thanks
forward to
for
seeing it in person this summer. So, you
Sounds
know,
like a plan.
keep the floors swept and stuff, and we'll come out there.
Sounds good. All right.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and happy building.
Take care, guys.